When wealth turns into escape, or, well, safety. But who needs that? That's the topic. Today's topic: turn Mamdani into soap. For household soap, of course, not the scented kind. Comrades, everything is going according to plan. The question is, whose plan? Was this really the intention? The main thing is to punish the successful. That's how I see it. Like in the old Soviet joke, if you build socialism in a desert, there will immediately be a shortage of sand. Apparently, building socialism in New York will lead to a shortage of people there soon. Only freeloaders will remain. Then our task will be to build a very high fence around New York so they can't seep through with their mentality onto our territory. Let them freeload inside their own little world. Just imagine a city that everyone knows as the capital of the world. A city that people once dreamed of living in, but now it's not the poor, not the outcasts, not the antisocial who are fleeing from there. The most successful, the most educated, the wealthiest people are fleeing from New York. And the most interesting thing is, they're not just fleeing anywhere, like migratory birds, but to the same place, Florida. Today I'll explain why this is happening and how Florida has actually become a better New York for people with brains and income. And what will happen to New York itself if this trend continues. And let me warn you right away, if you think you already understand everything like, oh, taxes, yes, you're very mistaken. You'll find at least a couple of surprises at the end of the video. And one of them directly concerns us, Russian-speaking immigrants. Let's start with the bare facts. Phrases that, as always, are more engaging than propaganda. According to tax authorities and various analysts, in recent years, tens of thousands of wealthy families have left or slipped away from New York, people with high incomes. What does this mean? The state of New York lost more than 12,000 high-income households alone. Who are these people? Well, these are people whose average family income is about $1 million a year. So they earn a lot, they're wealthy, they should be squeezed. But in Florida, it's the opposite. 12 million people moved from there, plus another 18 million from other places. So that's 30,000,000 such households with a huge amount of money, with businesses, with jobs. How is it with jobs? Just like that. The city is losing people. But it's not just losing bodies, noses, necks, ears. It's also losing taxpayers. According to budget studies, just from people moving from New York to Florida, not to mention everywhere else, the city and state lost $14 billion in taxes. These aren't just rich, greedy bastards. This is money that pays for the subway, for schools, for firefighters, for doctors, and yes, for that very police force that it's now so fashionable to hate. Look at what's happening in New York. The city and state have had some of the highest taxes in the country for years. At the same time, officials are convincing us, the middle class, that there's a main problem. If you make a lot of money, it means you must have robbed someone. That means you have someone else's money, so come here and put it into the common fund. For some reason, the common fund is always under their control. If this doesn't remind you of anything, then congratulations, you didn't live in the USSR. Because to us, this looks very familiar. Remember the Soviet joke, right? People do everything to become rich, and the government does everything to make sure, God forbid, that never happens. Only now this joke has been fully realized in the policies of New York State and New York City, with one difference. Before we had nowhere to go, but now we do, and it's called Florida. And it's definitely not where the polar bears roam, and this is where the first big question arises. What does Florida offer that New York either can't or doesn't want to? If it were just about the sun and palm trees, wealthy people would have moved to the Caribbean long ago. But they're moving specifically to Florida. In a few minutes, we'll break down why Florida is better for them and for us, not based on myths, but on specific points. And now let's honestly talk about what makes New York the Hollywood where... Not like that. From which it makes sense to run away without looking back. So why do people run from the great, amazing, brilliant, I'm not being ironic, New York? Let's list the main reasons most often mentioned by those who move. In interviews, surveys, studies. Well, obviously the first one, taxes. We all understood that. There's no state income tax in Florida. In New York, it's one of the highest in the country. Middle class can save tens of thousands, while higher earners can save hundreds of thousands. I have a simple question. If you work your whole life, take risks, build a business, create jobs, do you have to feed an endlessly growing bureaucracy that insults you and constantly accuses you of some kind of crimes? Or do you have the right to choose a system that doesn't take from you? Well, let's say almost everything is under the slogans of social justice. That's the first reason. But the second, even more important one is the quality of life. It's very interesting when people are asked why they left. Much more often they say not taxes, as we might think, but the degradation of the city. Well, they say it in different words, but that's basically what they mean. That is dirt, crime, homeless people, the smell of marijuana in the subway, graffiti, politeness. And we can't do anything about it. We can't help you in any way. And sometimes there's rudeness from officials. And the further it goes, the more rudeness there is. This is that very late, sick, tired New York, which is very reminiscent of the late Soviet reality. Well, of course, the quality of things here is much higher. The facade is still holding up, but the inside is already rotten. That's where the similarity is. Now, the policy regarding criminals and the police. This is where things get really interesting. Since 2020, a trendy slogan was launched across the country: defund the police, cut police funding, as if the police are the main problem. The main problem is the police, not criminals, not street gangs, not drug dealers. No, they just had a tough childhood. So, yes, the problem is with those who are still trying to hold them back. In New York, this rhetoric hit the NYPD, that's the New York Police Department, very hard. Experienced people are leaving, recruitment has dropped. No one really wants to get into this business. Motivation is falling. The representatives of the police unions themselves say we have a staffing crisis. There are already fewer of us than needed. The workload is higher than ever, and there's zero respect. Just now, they showed footage of some playful youth throwing snowballs, chunks of ice, bottles, and stones at the police. And after that, the mayor came out of the police station. He said they just played with snowballs. 2 people are in the hospital, 2 police officers are in the hospital just from playing with snowballs. And nothing, just imagine yourself in the place of that very police officer or his friend, or just someone else who also serves and is also on the streets of New York. You step outside and people film you on their phones shouting, "We'll sue you," regardless of your actions. You detain a criminal and 2 hours later that same person is released because of the state's lenient laws and reforms. You take risks, but in any difficult situation, you're the one who's blamed no matter what. How long would you last in this system? Either you left there altogether or you applied to Florida. Would you take me with you there? That's why when a rich person says, "I pay huge taxes and my kids are afraid to ride the subway," you don't even want to argue. Well, I never wanted to argue. I didn't live in New York in those times, but I did live there when, on the contrary, it was being rebuilt. People usually vote with their feet, right? All the other kinds of votes are just trivial. With their feet, with their dollars, so to speak, people vote through action. They take a suitcase and get on a plane and say, "Drang nach Miami." And here we come to the second topic. Tell me, have you ever heard the expression living out of a suitcase? Of course you have. In the USSR, this meant leaving for abroad, which almost never, well, until, let's say, 1972, 1973 could even happen. Today, successful New Yorkers literally live out of their suitcases. Realtors in Florida are talking about an explosive increase in the number of deals with buyers from New York. Well, especially those who want to move to 3 places, Miami, Palm Beach, and Broward, hundreds of millions of dollars just through their agency. People are buying a second home, then suddenly they realize that this is actually their main home. This is the place where they want to live. Why? Well, because Florida gives them 3 things. First, no taxes. No state income tax at all. We've already talked about this. You keep tens of % of your income. You keep hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. The climate. No winter depression, no ice and -10 on your way to work. And the very, very, very best part. The culture, the attitude toward business and order. In words, it might all sound the same, but in reality, they respect private property. They respect your rights. They respect your right to self-defense even much more. Or at least in Florida, they respect it. In New York, no. You had white privilege and he had a tough childhood. Even though you grew up in the same neighborhood. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, because in the second part, we'll talk about how New York, with all its problems, is starting to move to Florida along with those who are running away from them. New York with all its problems. And one of the surprises is about how our own Russian-speaking people can actually influence this. But now let's go back to New York and see what will happen if the trend continues. What is New York? It's a city where a small percentage of the wealthiest pay a huge share of all the taxes. According to estimates, the top tier of taxpayers provides up to 40% of the state's income tax revenue. The top percent is, well, about 1%. When they leave, those people, the budget gap grows. The budget for schools, transportation, social programs, and healthcare gets cut. Or you have to collect extra taxes from someone else. But who's left? The ones who stay are those who don't have the opportunity to leave, and very often those who are used to living off the state rather than their own labor. We've seen this before. We've seen cities where the middle class left and only officials and law enforcement remained. Well, law enforcement, yes. Everything related to the police and so on, independent from welfare. I'm not talking about any specific city right now. This is the image of any system where the state suffocates those who feed it. It's like, well, I don't know, you're sitting on a branch and cutting off that very, proverbial branch. You're cutting the branch you're sitting on. New York has every chance to go down this path. A city for tourists, bloggers, and thrill seekers. The beautiful facade of Manhattan and dangerous neighborhoods that you really shouldn't enter without security. Or better yet, don't go in at all. And now, surprise number one. A lot of the people who left New York for Florida aren't evil capitalists. I'm telling you some secrets here, despite how people like to portray them. These are people we know, people who started from scratch as immigrants. They learned the language, built a business or a career, raised children who have now become full-fledged Americans. In other words, that's you, ladies and gentlemen, just with suitcases and one-way tickets. They say a simple thing. We don't want to relive the late Soviet Union in New York. Once was enough for us. Let someone else go through it now. You've already seen how it ends when the government pretends to care about the poor, but in reality it destroys the middle class. And this is where we come to why this concerns us, Russian speakers living all across America. Not just in New York, not just in Florida. Our communities are made up of people who have gone through ideological conditioning, emigration, adaptation, and struggle. We are tough, guys. We know how to tell propaganda from reality. Well, at least some of us do, but we have one problem. We rarely share this experience systematically with those who still believe in Russia. And now I'm going to say something important. If you want the truth about what's happening with New York, with Florida, with America to spread among Russian speakers, whether in America or not, in Israel, in Europe, in Australia, anywhere, you can take part in this. YouTube is very simple. Subscribing to the channel is one thing. But if you subscribed and click the bell, then the algorithm takes it as a strong signal. This channel is important. It needs to be shown to a large number of people. If less than 20% of subscribers turn on the bell, we're just stuck in our own bubble. If it's more, our videos start being shown to a much wider Russian-speaking audience. That's why I have a request for you. Don't just subscribe, make sure to click the bell. It's easy to find. Next to the subscribe button. By doing this, you're doing something that's very important today, so that more and more people understand what's really happening, who is destroying normal life, and who is trying to protect it. Now let's get back to the joke I started with. Remember, people do everything they can to get rich, and the government does everything it can to make sure they don't get rich under any circumstances. This is how that joke looks today in real life in New York. He pays taxes, creates jobs. In return, he gets higher taxes and accusations that he doesn't pay his fair share. Fair share, as they like to say. What that actually means, nobody knows. The streets aren't very safe, that's putting it mildly. And officials who say, if you don't like it, get out of here. But the person says, all right, you're not holding me here, so I'm leaving. He buys a house in Florida, moves there. A year later, his friends move to Florida. In 2 years, his company or part of it moves as well. And you know what New York does? It keeps shouting, the rich are leaving because they're greedy. We need to tax those who stayed even more. Well, they just want more money, and as much as possible. So the joke turns into a tragic comedy. It's a classic scenario until the money finally runs out. I didn't say that quite right. The money doesn't run out completely, but we all remember who said that. Margaret Thatcher. We talked about it before her, she just phrased it very nicely. Surprise number 2. Many believe the rich will leave, but the city will manage. However, it's more complex. The problem isn't just about money. The problem is the critical mass of people who are ready to defend order and normalcy. This is how Giuliani pulled New York out of the criminal swamp in the 1990s. I first came to New York in '82, and until '86 I was moving between New York, Israel, and then Los Angeles. These 3 cities all the time. I worked there, I worked here. I had plays running in all 3 places. I directed them there, and so on. And I remember that nightmare. That completely impossible 42nd Street, that 34th Street. The horror of what was going on there. To even go there. You could go there if you had a strong guy with you. But God forbid in the evening or something. Middle class, business, police, city hall, which at some point took the side of the law, not the criminals. That's what happened in the 1990s when Giuliani came. Today, people treat them as a historical accident. If enough of those who pay taxes, vote for order, support the police, and aren't afraid to say no to radical experiments leave, then the electorate that's left will gladly vote for any new utopia in the style of free transportation, free food, free everything. But at whose expense? They don't care. At the expense of those who haven't left yet. This is a very dangerous moment. If you think this doesn't concern you living in Los Angeles, Chicago, Toronto, or Berlin, you're mistaken. This scenario has already been tested in different places. The only difference is whether people are ready to defend normalcy or will silently watch as their city goes down the drain. That is, your city is going down the toilet. This is an important moment. I know that among my viewers there are many people who went through the Soviet Union, through the incredible 1990s, through emigration. You are people who know how to survive. But we need to learn not only to survive, but also to make an impact. And not just sit in the kitchen and say, well, everything is going the same way, but to explain to your children, grandchildren, friends, and acquaintances what's happening. When high taxes kill the motivation to work, the police become victims. Criminals become victims of the system. They can't be punished. And successful people are made into enemies of the people. Our channel is exactly about this. We analyze who is to blame for life getting worse, and who, on the contrary, is making efforts to improve it. And if you want Russian speakers in America and around the world to have an alternative point of view, help share this video. Send this video to 1 or 2 of your friends, especially to those who still live in an information bubble, where New York is the city of dreams and Florida is just for retirees. Let them see the real numbers, real trends, and real consequences that they don't see on their TVs or even from their favorite bloggers. And let me remind you once again, subscribing and hitting the bell equals a wider audience. If a viewer just watches and leaves, the algorithm will decide that the information isn't important. If you subscribed, leave a like and write a comment. And especially if you turned on the bell notification. The algorithm goes, and starts actively showing the video to other Russian-speaking viewers. And we stop living in a bubble. Let's not sum up, but make a forecast. If New York's current policies continue, taxes will remain among the highest, police officers will always be blamed, and those who commit crimes will somehow always be considered victims. If businesses and wealthy people continue to vote with their feet and move to Florida, then we have two scenarios. First, New York slowly turns into a beautiful shell where tourists are shown skyscrapers, Broadway, and a couple of safe islands, and real residents live in a city with crumbling infrastructure, rising crime, and an always empty budget. Second, at some point there comes a breaking point when people will say, "We've seen this before. We've already been through this. We don't want another USSR in Manhattan. We want order, not an endless experiment with our lives." And then if these people turn out to be the majority, then the city has a chance to return to common sense, support the police, make the tax system competitive, stop demonizing the successful, and become a place people want to come to again, not a place they run away from. What will happen? The first or second option doesn't depend only on New Yorkers. It depends on whether there will be different cities, different diasporas. We are Russian speakers. Tell the truth. Share experiences. Support the platforms that are engaged in this. For my part, I will continue to talk about things that, as they think, are inconvenient to discuss in mainstream media. Your part: subscribe, hit the bell, comment. Send this video to those who still don't understand why people are leaving New York, why Florida welcomes them with open arms. And now, a question for you. If you had to decide today, where would you start your life from scratch? With skyscrapers and rising taxes, or in a state with palm trees and zero income tax? What would you choose? Write in the comments. New York. I keep choosing New York. Florida. Kazakhstan, Switzerland, Turkey. Next. Already left, and I regret it. Or already left, and I absolutely don't regret it. It's very interesting to see where we are, which side of history we're on. Well, that's where we'll end for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening, and I really hope that we can convey all this information, all these thoughts to as many of our, I can't even say compatriots, fellow speakers as possible. I mean the Russian language. Goodbye.